If you don't already know by now, Temtem is a MMORPG developed by the Dev Studio. It is a monster taming game that has self-proclaimed itself to be as inspired by Pokemon. While being within the same genre, Temtem has several factors that differentiate itself from Pokemon and other games within the monster taming category. But what we're here to talk about today is Pansun. Pansun is one of Temtem's 3 in-game currencies. Besides Pansun, there are 2 others, Novas and Feathers. You can earn feathers throughout playing the game, and you can obtain Novas by collecting them via Battle Pass completion or purchasing them from the in-game store. Pansun, like feathers, are a currency you can only obtain through playing through the game. You can buy all sorts of stuff with Pansun, from healing items, clothing, renaming your Tims, teleportation, which is Temtem's version of Pokemon's fly mechanic. You can also make a dojo club, or even get miscellaneous items and Temtem from places like the auction house, which is Temtem's version of the Pokemon GTS. However, with all that being said, Temtem has an issue with its Pansun currency specifically. It simply lacks the payout to justify the MMO grind that it takes to get them, so let's talk about it. So let's talk about the way at first you would earn Pansun in the game and why these methods aren't sustainable in the long term. Number 1. Battling Tamers through the game's story. I've spoken about this a couple times before, but Temtem's campaign gives virtually no money from winning, unless that is from the island's boss fight, and even then that's inconsistent. You will not really get a lot of money at all. There are people who say not to spend Pansun during the campaign and save that for the post game, but even with doing that, you'd hardly have any funds stashed away. Several times you'll hear me compare this game to Pokemon in terms of money making, and in this instance, Pokemon is not shy about fair payout for wins against trainers, and also bosses, aka their Elite Four, their gyms, their EVA organizations, and their champions. Hell, Pokemon even has specific trainer classes that specifically pay a larger sum upon winning. Not only that, but there are items like the Amulet Coin and moves like Payday that increase the amount of money that you can earn in those games. So why is it that Temtem hardly gives any Pansun during its campaign? Number 2. Dojo Rematches. So in Temtem, once you've beaten the dojo leader, aka that gym, Temtem's version of gym leaders, every week you can rematch them. Upon rematching these Tamers, they will have competitively viable teams, and you will go through a pick and ban phase just like in an online competitive battle. Upon winning, you will receive 8,000 Pansun, and if you lose, until you win against them, every loss subtracts 800 Pansun from your potential winnings. So if you lose and then win, you'll get 7,200, but if you just win, then you'll get the full 8,000. Correct me if I'm wrong about that though. This can be done every week, but will only net you about 64,000 Pansun between the 8 dojo leaders across the archipelago, if you win first time in each rematch. It sounds like a lot, but we will go into in a bit why this is abysmally low. Number 3. Koish fishing. Another weekly activity you can do in Temtem is Koish fishing at the Nuru Lodge location on the island of Kisiwa. Koish is a catchable creature in Temtem that is reminiscent of Spinda from Pokemon, in the sense that Koish can have a variety of different patterns when you encounter it. Koish can also be any of the game's typings in addition to its base water type. The goal of this activity is to catch a Koish that matches all 5 of the traits that the Lodge Guide is looking for that week, which will net you a reward. Even with getting a perfect Koish, the payment for this activity, Pansun-wise, is usually below 10k. Which, if you're pressed for time and trying to get consistent money, would not be lucrative for the player. Number 4. Postal Service. Another method of money making is the Postal Service daily side quests. The Postal Service is a system of daily quests that can be picked up from the post office in the city of Uhuru and Kisoa. You would need to talk to the clerk, who would then give you 1 to 3 food deliveries to deliver to random Tamers all across the archipelago. There is a spot on the wiki with locations for all of them, so you don't have to really worry about where they are specifically. But as you can see, even with getting the maximum of 3 food parcels to deliver, the payment is no more than like 2,000 Pansun, plus a possible egg that you can maybe sell for the same price as the net payout at the auction house. It is something you can do daily, but this payout is so low you can hardly do anything with your earnings. Number 5. Wishing Wells and PvP. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on either of these. Like with the Postal Service and koi fishing, I don't really see them as consistent or good methods of money making, but wishing wells are scattered all across the islands in Temtem, and if you have a disposable wish you well coin item, you can drop it in that well for a random reward drop. And that random reward drop will not always be money, but this reward can be clothing, a small payout of Pansun, usually like 1,000, or pheromones for a particular Temtem species, which will increase the likeliness of their encounter and the rate of better stats upon encountering them. Wish You Well coins are extremely scarce, and there's not really much to say about them beyond that. PvP paddles, on the other hand, they can net you a Pansun earning, usually of about 1k to 3k, depending on how high you are up on the ladder. For newcomers, I don't recommend this because until you have a TV trained team, competitive online is not really super viable, even at the lowest point of the ladder. And not only that, the battles themselves can be quick, but if you're not winning, then you're wasting a lot of time. You don't need perfect SV stats, which are Temtem's versions of IVs, for this method, since PvP auto-scales your Temtem to have perfect SVs, but you still have to put in a lot of effort to TV train your team, which is the EVs, the Pokemon equivalent, and that in itself can be both expensive and very time consuming. I will, however, link 3 teams recommended by one of the top PvP players, Mr. Rishi, in the description below. You'll be able to see what Tims, moves, traits, items, and TV stat distributions that you'll need if you do choose to do this method. And finally, number 6. Freetem Organization. The last method of obtaining in-game Pansun is through the Freetem Organization. From the wiki, they describe themselves as believing Temtem should be free to roam the land and not locked inside of a Tem card. To incentivize the liberation of Temtem, they offer Pansun and weekly rewards. This is basically a parody on the organization PETA in the real world, and you can find their building next to the breeding center on the Amnesia Island. So every week for this activity, you can catch and release up to 200 Temtem. I believe it is shortened from 400, and depending on the catch rate and level of that Tem, it will determine your Pansun payout. There is even a website that will tell you the estimated payout for different species that I'll also link below. So with all that said and done, but we're going to go over why basically this is not lucrative for the player base. So my and many players' issue with the money grinding in this game is that you as a player are not being valued for your time. Abysmally low payouts for activities requiring hours upon hours of your time are not only not fair, but you feel like you're being scammed. And with Temtem's self-proclamation of being a Pokemon-like experience, you would expect there to at least be ways of circumventing the extremely low payout for these weekly activities. Especially since Pansun is a must-have currency if you are getting into competitive play. No, you don't need it for the online PvP because of upscaling, but in tournaments you'll need those perfect Tems. And speaking of which, let's get into why, because that's what this video is mainly focusing on. For competitive, the only way to get perfect Temtem is either by breeding or by buying what someone else has already bred. Breeding with perfect gender RNG combined with the limited fertility and how many times you can breed a Tem until you can't anymore is at best around 50,000 Pansun investment, and that's just for one Tem, not an entire team of 8. The cost stems from breeding items that you'll need for each stage of the breeding process to guarantee perfect stats bred down from the parent to the offspring. On the flip side, if you are buying your Temtem from the auction house, then depending on the species and if you care about egg learn techniques, you're looking at about 20,000 to 60,000 per Temtem. So adding this up, if you breed, this is a $400,000 investment for a perfect Tem, and if you buy, then it's about 160,000 to 480,000 investment for a team of 8. This is also not factoring in items that you will be used to TV train your team to the stat distribution that you want for a competitive moveset. Can you do this for free by beating random Temtem in the wild? Yes, and there are even items to help this out. However, this is an hours-long grind. Yes, this is an MMO, but no method should be this tedious when other games in the monster taming genre have circumvented this issue. Not to mention, other things within Temtem itself are not as grindy. And even beyond that, Temtem is not really like an traditional MMO like a Final Fantasy. It's literally like a Pokemon-like experience. And in my Pokemon-like experience, for my competitive grinding, it shouldn't be this much. So, back to that point about Temtem itself not as grindy in some aspects. Take for example, level grinding. With the Loto method of level grinding, you can get one Tem from level 1 to level 100 in less than 5 minutes with the right setup. And you can obtain those means in not overly complex ways either. So why is obtaining the Pansun needed complex then? For how grindy it is to obtain Pansun, you cannot be surprised at how many bot accounts exist to generate money. It's like when companies make obtaining media extremely difficult, but fault the consumer for pirating. If you make things accessible, there's no need to go to that extreme in the first place. For my conclusion, I offer my personal recommendations for how these things can be improved moving forward. For one thing, there's a lot of talk about the game economy this and the game economy that. The game economy will not break if the frequency to challenge dojo leaders were increased to twice a week instead of one. That 64,000 Pansun payout upon 8 wins now increases to 128,000, and I don't think that's going to break anything about the economy. The reward for 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5 Koish should be quintupled. So if you're getting 4k to 5k for it, then it should now be 20k to 25k, since it is something you can only do once per week anyway. This is not game breaking. That's literally the cost of one Tem, or half the items needed for perfect RNG breeding of a Tem anyway. For Postal Service and Wish You Well coins, I believe the payout should be anywhere from 1k and going as high as 25k. And this can be done at random. So if you throw in a coin, you might get 1k, then you might get 10k, you might get 5k, and you might get 25k if you're really lucky. And this can be done at random, and it doesn't need to be an exact every time. And lastly, for Freetem, if the cap for how many Tems stays decreased at its 200 Tem limit, then the payout for it needs to exponentially increase to compensate that extreme loss of funds. If kept at the original formula for determining the reward, then the payout needs to double or even triple. That possible 100k that you would get from catching and releasing 200 Hazrats from hours and hours of gameplay needs to now be 200 to 300k until a full 200 Tem completion is done. I don't think this is asking for too much or even in danger of breaking the game's economy, at least not in all of my suggested methods. Maybe I'm wrong on any front, you'd be welcome to say so in the comments, but if you're a dick about it, I will delete your comment and block you from my channel. All in all, I think Temtem is still a really fun game with lots of replay value. There's even Temtem Showdown, Temtem's version of the Pokemon Showdown formula, which is set to come sometime in the future. This can also circumvent a lot of the grinding that is relegated solely for tournament-made teams only. But since PvP isn't the only thing money is used for, and we have no idea when Temtem Showdown will ever be implemented, this ongoing Pansun problem persists and threatens to burn out the player base from wanting to continue playing the game. I'm not saying that everyone will abandon Temtem, because that's silly, and there is a lot of people who enjoy playing it. There's something in the game for everyone, and Temtem also has its loyal player base. But for people, especially those coming over from games like Pokemon, which is set to release in November, it might be extremely off-put by the high grind, low reward environment Crema has set in place for this game. So if you have enjoyed my thoughts or just this video in general, please leave a like and also comment, let me know your opinions. What do you think can be done to improve the Pansun economy in Temtem? What methods can be done? What things can be tweaked? Or even if you agree with me or not, you can let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, go ahead and give it a like, share and comment if you're really feeling generous, subscribe if you enjoy my content and would like to see more, and I will see you all in the next one.